In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a fat stacked drum set configuration within the Decades expansion library for Superior Drummer 3. Let's go ahead and go into our preset menu. We'll go under the Tune Track heading, and we're going to choose this towel parallel. That brings up our toweled Ludwig kit. So these drums were sampled with actual towels on them to give them a very unique sound. So very dry and already a nice fat sound. We have our mixer configured accordingly within this preset. And we're going to make some adjustments and stack additional drums to get an even fatter stacked sound. Let's just take a quick listen as is. And the first thing I want to do is, with the snare selected, go into more. We're going to add a center articulation stack, and I want to use the rim shot of the same toweled Ludwig Superphonic selection. We'll say stack on center, and even just that change will give you a bigger, fatter snare sound. But I don't like those lower rim shot velocities. I'm going to click on Control Option on my Mac, and we'll pin the velocity pad. And I'm going to select just the rim shot. You can hear how some of those lower velocities sound. I want the lower velocities or the ghost notes to be played with just the center articulation. So very quick fix, we'll use our velocity gate with the stacked rim shot articulation selected. We'll bring this up to a point where it is filtering out or gating out the majority of the lower velocity notes. So lower velocity notes will be using the center or original snare articulation only. Next, I'm going to go ahead and grab another snare drum. We'll say add to center. So we're going to stack 3 snare drums. I can really grab anything I want within the Decades library. And we go ahead and grab this Tom Bell brass center articulation, because that's already a fat sounding snare. And we'll see how that sounds. Now, right now, these top 2 drums, the center and rim shot articulation of the same drum, have towels on them. They're a bit quieter than this Tom Bell brass. So what I'm going to do, select the Tom Bell brass. We're just going to turn that down on the level to match those a bit more. And now we have an even bigger stacked snare drum sound. Next, let's address the bass drum. Already great sounding bass drum, but I want to bring a stack onto that as well. We're going to add to the open articulation. Now, if you're unsure of which articulation to use, by the way, if we go into our MIDI groove, you can see we're using the open articulation. So that is what I will use. Go to more, add to open. We'll go into the Decades section. And let's grab this leady calfskin, big boomy bass drum. We want to make sure we get the one with the bottom snare buzz. This top one does not have that. Bottom one does. Stack on open. So it just gives it a bit more depth. Now we can adjust that in a variety of ways. The stacked bass drum. Maybe we don't want that attack. You can taper that off with the envelope. So we just get the tail, bring that back a little bit. Or we can adjust the release and sustain. So we'll bring that down. And we can even taper it with a curved slope. So now you don't have so much sustain, so you can really contour it any way you want. Let's just bring that back up a little bit. Shift click, by the way, for fine-tune adjustments, both with the curve and this release. Kind of just eliminate some of that extra ring. And again, we don't want to make any envelope adjustments on the original bass drum. Now stacked together, they sound like that. All right, next I want to take a look at the toms. Very short staccato tom sounds, which is fine, but let's take a look at a couple options of what we can do. A very quick option would be to select a tom, and just use the same drum, just the one that's not dampened with a towel, because we do have that option. If I go to my fill here, you can hear what that sounds like. But I'm going to hit undo, so Command Z 3 times. If I wanted to, I could stack, click on more, go to center articulation, and we can just bring something in, just like we did with everything else that has a bit more depth. Let's use the Slingerland Radio King. Now it's going to be a bit louder. I'm going to bring the volume down. We might even bring the pitch down as well, but let's first of all bring back the release. So we'll shorten it quite a bit. And that might be too much, so let's bring that back, shift click, find a good spot. And I'm going to bring the pitch down to match this a bit closer. It doesn't have to be exact. Of course, we have the drumhead advanced algorithm. And that seems a bit closer. I brought the pitch down a little bit more. That's actually a nice sound there. So here's the original. Here's what we added with an adjusted release and pitched down or tuned down using the drumhead advanced algorithm. Sounds pretty good together. Let's do the same thing with the others. We'll go add 2. So we'll grab the larger Slingerland, and I just realized I did something. This is a great thing to point out. With the stack I just did, I grabbed the stack without the snare drum. We'll fix that in a second. I want to make sure I don't do that when I add this second stack. So there's the Slingerland without the snare drum on, and there it is with the snare drum on. Let's try that pitch combination. Again, let's bring back the release. And let's bring down the volume of just the Slingerland. I like that, just a little bit more depth. I'm going to actually bring that release back. And let's maybe pitch it up a little bit. Yeah, that sounds like a good place. So let's go back to this top tom, and what I'm going to do is right click on it. You can see we use drumsticks, wires off. This is a great trick, by the way. I don't have to remove my stack and select it all again. I just need to go down to drumsticks. I want the same drum, 9x13 Radio King, but with the snare articulation. Finally, let's do the same thing for the floor tom. We'll go to more, add to, center, and we want the bigger Radio King with the snare drum. So that second selection, stack on center. Let's listen to the difference. Let's bring the volume down. Let's see if we can match that tuning. We'll use the higher quality processed algorithm. And let's bring the release back just a bit. Now, I like that. We're still using the toweled toms, but we just brought in a little bit more life, a little bit more sustain and tone by stacking in some other toms and adjusting the envelope, the level, and the tuning with the advanced drumhead algorithm as needed. Let's take a listen to what we have. And again, those are those toms. I really like how that sounds. Just for comparison, let's see where we started. I'm going to go back into my preset menu to tune track and towel parallel. And don't be afraid to do this because we have a great undo feature. So if you ever want to A-B anything, it's very easy to do. I'm going to select where we started. Let's take a listen. I'm going to click undo, Command Z. We can go right back to where we were. Want to jump very quickly to the end. Let's listen to the fill. Now, compared to the bass drum and snare drum, I feel like the toms are a bit softer. We can maybe turn down the bass drum and snare, or in this case, let's just turn up the tom stacks. We'll just go a couple dB. I'm selecting the entire drum, and by adjusting the level, I'm adjusting the level of the entire stack, still keeping the volume adjustments between each stacked instrument the same. So for example, the original tom is at 0, this floor tom's at -4. If I click on the stack or simply click on the drum, make a selection, you can see now we're at -2 and 2 dB. So we maintain that relative volume relationship, which is important. And by the way, let's not forget that we can still leverage the mixer to get an even bigger sound. So very quickly, we could add some reverb. We'll just enable that entire channel. We also have this comp channel. Now, right now, it's not utilizing any of our stacks. We'd have to send those channels to the comp, but even without making an adjustment, just in this preset, if we turn this up, we'll get a bigger sound. And if we want, let's just copy this comp bus send. So I'm just doing Alt or Option, click and drag. So now we're sending everything to the compressor. So you can add as much or as little of the compressor channel as you want. And that's how you can create a fat stacked drum configuration within Superior Drummer 3 using the Decades expansion library.